Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this episode of Demystifying Money. I'm joined by Tevia Hoalst. She is the owner of Dakota Accounting. And we're going to talk today about the accounting industry. We're going to talk about business and some financial planning and bookkeeping and accounting moves that you can make in your business to feel more successful, not just during tax season, but all year long. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about the industry in general for people who might be interested in joining the industry, maybe curious to see if that's something they need in their business, to see, what's going on in the industry, how it's changing, and how her company is trying to be a leader in that. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, I'm so grateful to be here. I like your podcast and the content you put out, and I appreciate the audience.
Oh, thank you.
This episode of Demystifying Money with Misty Lynch is proudly sponsored by Soundview Financial Advisors. Visit www.soundviewfinancialadvisors.com to learn more.
So tell me a little bit more about your career path. I think there's a lot of time, I know when I graduated from college, and this was, over 20 years ago, like accounting was a big career choice. And it's something that I've seen actually, like, it seems like it's either declining, or I've heard that the average age is going up north of 60, kind of like financial planning is as well. So I'd love to hear how you kind of fell into this industry and a little bit about your path along the way.
Absolutely. Mine is a little bit unique where it didn't actually start from accounting. I do have accounting and finance background, and I was, doing that for work, but I actually had a corporate job that was using an analytical skill set, and it based from having an incredibly poor culture. And when I realized I wanted to go out on my own and start my own company, I didn't even know, what I would offer. It was about the base of the company. I needed to take what I had experienced and flip it on its head and have great culture. That was kind of my MO. And then I had to step into, okay, well, what will people pay me to do before I can build a team that's better than me? And so that landed on accounting, and it just kind of started from there and quickly built a team. We're up to 15 people, and we're just having a great time doing it, but we always lead with service and culture first, because I just think that that breeds an environment where the client gets the best from the company.
I think that's such a good point that you mentioned, because a lot of, and I think in my industry as well, traditionally, service wasn't exactly leading the charge. It was more, okay, getting, assets and getting clients, growing numbers, looking at the bottom line, because again, it's finance, very analytical, but also I feel like that piece of it, was missing so much that it almost was like surprisingly easy to make way into that space
Yes.
and be a little bit different. So what was the culture like when when you were first working in corporate? What were some of the common, the goals, and how did you know that you wanted your company to be different?
Yeah, well, I always start by saying the corporation itself, in other departments, there, many, 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 many people had good experiences from their takeaways there. And I think it all comes down really to direct management and the department that you're in. And unfortunately, my particular department had a kind of a toxic manager, and not just myself, the entire department was miserable. And it really felt like nobody was listening, nobody was helping, to the point where when we did start going to HR, we learned the hard way that HR is not really generally there for the employee. They're there to protect the corporation. And so we just had a lot of poor experiences with that, and just being treated kind of disposable and almost childlike, not given information. So the way we've turned that around is, honestly, the exact opposite. We're incredibly transparent with our team. We're very vocal about, you're adults. You choose to be here. We're going to give you the information that you need to make the right choices for your own life. And we hope that we present a culture that is somewhere that you choose to be and choose to be long term. And so far that tends to work well for us.
Yeah, no, I think having a culture that is loud, or that it is very understood from the beginning, from even the hiring process, this is how we operate, and meaning it. I think a lot of
Yeah.
people have said like, oh, they say they're all family there, and that's And I was like, okay, there's a lot of toxic families. Maybe we should be careful. But I
Exactly.
think it's nice to and I think sometimes like, and I've worked for leaders who've been amazing, and I've worked for ones that haven't been. And I do feel like you can kind of sense it, like it's coming through. It's very genuine. So I think that's definitely a great way to run a business. But I also love the business of accounting services and that financial end of it, because I feel like there's so much hesitation and fear to look at the numbers, and a lot of great business owners have wonderful ideas and products and services, but they don't want to look at the financial end or can't grasp it, or they think that it's not for them. So I was curious, what are some of the services that you offer, especially for small business owners or people who are really maybe nervous about bookkeeping and finance?
Yeah. What we offer, the way I explain it easily, but I'll go more in depth, is we do any accounting finance function outside of filing your taxes. So, what that would mean is inside the business, all internal functions that are needed, bookkeeping, payroll, sales tax, billing, invoicing, any myriad of those items that would, replace an employee on your staff are the things that we're going to do. And it's an important concept because when you talk about, the business owners that may or may not understand the financials well, you also have to consider, do you have the skill set to hire internally a good team member to do the bookkeeping?
Mhm.
We take and make that easy because we've already vetted our team. We have the very best. And so when you're working with a firm that's doing that, you can know that we have the skill set to test and continue to train our staff to kind of be very top notch and replace what may or may not be an internal employee.
Yeah, I think that's, and I think those are great questions to ask. And I think one of the first, things that people should look at as they're, starting a business is the bookkeeping side, either learning how to
Mhm.
understand it themselves or deciding if they're ready to outsource that or bring it in-house. I think there's so much information that comes from those, the ledgers and the reports. And I think that it's really important for business owners who want to maybe get to the point where they can scale, or they can move it from being like you know, not just a small business, but almost like a hobby or something that they're dialing into a larger business. I think that those numbers are really going to tell them a lot and give them all that information. So I wondered,
Yeah.
when you're thinking about businesses that are maybe thinking about scaling, what are some things that they really need to know before they potentially take on too much?
That is such a great question because I was just on a client call yesterday and they're growing really fast and they didn't even realize the value at which, their accounting bookkeeping team can bring them. And they were so happy by the end of the call because I just asked them, what are some of your goals? Where are you going? And some of the things that they talked about were investing in bigger items, that are going to bring value long term and have savings and these kinds of things, also debt that they're currently carrying. And what they never connected is that if you're actively talking to your team that is compiling your bookkeeping, we have the skill set to help with those decisions. And owners a lot of time think they're alone in figuring out these ideas, but also figuring out when is the right time. Can I afford it? What is my payoff going to be? And in reality, my comment to them was, give me everything you're thinking about. I can calculate for you. What do you need to pay off when? What should you pay off first? What is more important to debt to hang on to? When can you afford to invest in these larger, picture items that will help you scale? You can lean on people around you so it doesn't feel so lonely and make data-based decisions that take all of the anxiety away from that planning.
I think it's so helpful, and I think it's important that you mentioned that a lot of business owners feel alone because they might not know who to talk to about this, or the people who
Yeah.
might be talking to them are only the vendors selling the new tech or the tools, or
Yeah.
thinking to themselves, and really the only thing that they've seen is what's gotten them to this point. So I think
Yes.
that's so important to have somebody who's a third party that kind of understands the business, but also can like analyze the actual data to say, this
Yeah.
is not worth stressing over. We can do this, or this is probably not the right time for you. And so I think that is so important because other than that, a lot of times we're kind of guessing, kind of trial and
Yes.
error, which can be very
The
expensive.
gut feeling.
Yes.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
A,
And
a
they
lot
think
of
that's
owners
impossible.
bring in a lot of stress and emotion. And I am very adamant that if we lean on what you already have in front of you, your data, assuming that, it's good,
Mhm.
there doesn't have to be any stress or emotion in the decisions that need to be made in a business. And that's really comforting when they kind of that clicks for them.
Yeah. I was talking with somebody recently on the podcast who was doing business, like valuations and like sales and mergers and stuff. And I was thinking about how business owners don't necessarily always think about leaving the business or selling the business, but I thought how important it is for that the records and stuff, because he said something that I found interesting. He said you can get a really great deal on some businesses if their records are in terrible shape, like if they just don't know what's
Yeah.
going on. And I was thinking about how true that is, because it's hard to understand what your business is worth if you're not
Yeah.
looking at those reports or you don't really understand it. And so some business owners who get to the point where they do want to sell or retire or need to, they might that might be a huge financial mistake that probably could have been avoided if they'd paid attention to it sooner. Do you see that sometimes when it comes to people who are actually thinking about buying a business?
Absolutely. We just went through an example with a client that they thought they wanted to sell. They had an offer on the table, and the discussion that we actually had was it would benefit them more to continue to run the company for another 2 to 3 years, very thoughtfully, how they structure the company, the decisions that they make, so that when they go back out to market again, they get a number that they actually are happy with and looking for because they have intentionally set themselves up for that. I didn't touch on this before, but the reason I decided to go out on my own is actually when my husband and I got married, the vineyard that we got married at, I just fell in love with the idea of running that. And the owner was, quite old. And the night of our wedding, he came out to the party and I said, hey, would you ever think of selling? And he was this story. He had not ever set himself up for that. And so what ended up happening is he wanted this astronomical number, and the reality of the numbers did not justify it. And it didn't, because since he never set himself up to sell, he stole the value out of the company by driving down expenses so his taxes were lower. And the conversation I had to have with him is, you don't get a double dip. You
Yeah.
take the value out of the company now and you really show a lot of expenses so your profit is low and you pay less taxes, or you show profit, you pay some taxes along the way, and then you have a higher valuation, and it's on the back end that you get your value. You don't get to go for both. And
That's
he wanted to explain to me, sorry, how the value was still there. And I said, I have to go with the paperwork. That's what the bank is going to do. And the number's not there. So it happens all of the time.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that it's definitely something when lenders get involved and the banks are involved, they don't just go with their gut feelings, and not anymore. It used to be maybe a little bit more lenient, or they can use more discretion, where now it is really clear that the numbers have to line up. So I think that's such an important thing for business owners to think about. Yes, there are expenses running a business. I do think that this piece of it though, and really understanding the pros and cons of the way you might be doing it, where can it benefit you in the long run?
Yeah.
And so I think that's an interesting example. And man, I would love to own I can imagine how beautiful a vineyard where you're getting married now would be.
Oh, it was so beautiful. I was so ready to be like an event planner for weddings.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad it didn't work out, because the next year was COVID and all events went away
Yeah.
and it's all evenings and weekends. So everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, no, I think I had a hallmark moment where I was in a Wilmington, Vermont. The country store was for sale, like the land, and it had a country store and a little restaurant. And I was like, maybe this is it. This is just what I do. So just gonna
Yeah.
operate this. And then I was like, no, this is actually probably a money pit, way too expensive. But it's all right to always be thinking about those kind of things. At least we know the questions to ask. I saw
Certainly.
that one of the things that you say with your business, that you're looking to obliterate the status quo. So I'd love to hear your thoughts more on like what the status quo is, just because there might be people out there who are like, I do work with a bookkeeper, I do work with people who are helping me, but I don't feel like
Yeah.
I don't understand what I'm doing. Maybe I just get reports or stuff like that. So what do you mean when you say that you're looking to obliterate the status quo?
Our industry is notorious for two things. One, drawing in people that want to work with numbers, not necessarily people, and so they're not necessarily always wanting to talk to you or very good at talking to you. They might be great at the work, but the other thing is service. The industry is shrinking, and that is in the benefit of the accounting firm's side and not small business. And what that means is they can drop the bar and nobody's really holding them accountable, because where do you go? To the next firm that's acting the same. So when I created the company, from day one, our mission statement was obliterate the status quo. And I can tell you, every single week at our company meetings, the very first thing we do is obliterate the status quo examples. And I constantly am explaining to the team, we must keep this front of mind, because that is how we are different. We show up, we want to talk to our clients, we want to actually improve their situation, not just report on it. So the way that we show up for the clients is being very proactive at pointing out things that maybe they're blind to, or they don't know, or they're just not having time to look at. And so we try to be a really interactive partner that is a definite shift in the environment of accounting, but that's how we come to the table and make a difference.
And how much of that stems from, and this is a general thing for all business owners who are maybe thinking like, yes, I'm in my industry or whatever I do, I want to be different. I want to be, service line. I want to, make sure that, my clients are welcomed and comfortable and feel like they can talk. But how much did that come from picking up the right clients? So is there anybody that, you have at your firm where you feel like this is the ideal type of client we'd like to work with? And then are you turning away some clients that might not fit because the culture is so important?
Absolutely. Yes. We have clients that totally fit what we're looking for, and we love them. And to be honest, you get what you put in, right? So when the clients are reciprocal of wanting to talk to us, wanting to be involved, they get more out of us because we know who they are, we know what they want, and we're happy to engage with that. We are like anyone else. We do have clients that don't talk to us as much because that's just their MO, or they're busy, building their empire. And that's okay. We're not going to fire them for that. However, they most certainly aren't getting the value out of us that they could. And we do try to come and do what we can, but we're only half the battle. They have to come in as well. There are clients that we do turn away, and that is all about mindset. It is all about attitude. I've been known to let a client or two go if they just aren't respectful of our staff. And that's few and far between, but it's much harder for me to replace my staff, unfortunately, than a client. So when they come in, and we've had a few times where they kind of get out of line, and sometimes we give them a warning, or sometimes it's, bad enough initially that it's a no-go from the beginning. But I certainly, will the give to our staff and make sure that they know they're safe based on our culture.
Yeah, I think that's important for all business owners to know, especially if you're managing people and you move beyond, even if you're self-employed. I will say this, like, when you have those situations where you don't want to answer the phone because you see a certain client's number pop up,
Yes.
that should be enough for you to kind of revisit like what is happening as far as that process is concerned. Because who's getting the best service? If you really like, and I've seen this so much with, financial advisors who really want the higher, net worth clients and things like that. They don't enjoy working with them. They don't like them as people. And I have to say, like, I don't think there's any of my clients I wouldn't mind being stuck in an elevator with if I had to be. And I think that's very
Mhm.
rare, but also it comes from the fact that, like, yeah, there's a certain amount of respect. And I think just general vibe that you have to have where you feel like it's a good fit or not, especially when there's other people on the team impacted, because you're so right. You know, replacing, staff is expensive and it's hard and it's time consuming. So I think that's such a good thing to look out for, even if it means short term, very uncomfortable conversation or
Yes.
loss, of somebody financially. So it's definitely a good point. Um, I talk to people all the time and recommend that they, work with, a bookkeeper, or they get some kind of, tax strategy done, for their business specifically. But I'm curious for you, what are some of the, maybe the myths around bookkeeping or what it is? Because I do think there is some confusion out there when people are like, I think I have one, and they don't.
Certainly. I think it's a couple things. One is understanding to the extent that you need to. Not every owner needs to know how to do the bookkeeping,
Mhm.
but understanding, I would put myself in an example. Anytime I've ever made an assumption about another industry or another job that I personally haven't done, you have a tendency to downplay what it takes to do it or the importance of it. So I think acknowledging one, there's a reason it's something you need in business. There's a reason that serious businesses, operating have some kind of bookkeeping, taxes, of course, all of that. And so acknowledging it's important and that there is incredible data you can get from it when you do it right.
Mhm.
The other thing would just be utilizing it.
Mhm.
There's so many owners that have gold at their fingertips, and they are out, like we were talking about before, trying to find other ways to answer questions that are right in front of them in the data. And so leveraging what you have in front of you is probably the most
Mhm.
important thing that I could say.
Yeah, no, I think that it's a good point. I think that a lot of times there is the information in front of you. It's just knowing how to understand it or read it. It could be complicated for people. And I know I talk to a lot of business owners or people who maybe have left corporate or they've decided to go out on their own. And I think one of the biggest things that I mostly that I hear most of the time is, you know, how do I find what can I deduct? What kind of expenses do I have? Especially for a lot of people who are now working from their homes and maybe have very, very low overhead businesses. So how would having like a bookkeeping and tax planning strategy help those business owners who are really kind of stuck figuring out, what they can do because they're now experiencing taxes as a self-employed person?
It goes back to making sure the partner that you pick, whether it's your CPA or bookkeeper, is communicating to you because they have knowledge that you don't. Obviously, the CPAs know tax code, bookkeepers know generally how things are expensed, what is expensed, what isn't. We are not the tax accountant, but we know what they do. We see
Yeah.
it all the time. So making sure that number one, ask questions. If you're going to live with your head in the sand, you're not going to learn much, but ask what you don't know. Ask them, what can I maximize here? And I would follow that with, if you're not getting communicated with your partner, find someone who will, because the knowledge is there and all you have to do is be willing to ask a few questions and your business will benefit in its profit.
I also feel like I'm getting a lot of questions from people who maybe have seen some tax or some, business planning advice on like TikTok and other social media platforms. And some of it, I don't know. I mean, part of me is happy that people are thinking about it and asking questions, but also some of it's a little bit alarming or potentially illegal. So what are some of your thoughts on that? Are you getting those kind of questions as well? And how it's so important because literally like it's the IRS that you're you're dealing with, so you kinda wanna make sure you're on the
Yeah.
right side of things, but what are your thoughts with the changes in the industry on that end?
I think all questions and all knowledge is good.
Mhm.
So even if it's starting from a place of maybe that TikTok you saw was like half information or it's not applicable to your industry or how you're working, I still think it's okay to, because it brings awareness, and what other questions does it spur you to ask? So I'm guilty of it. My partner, is on the operations side of us, and I love TikTok. She made a nice TikTok addiction for me. And I love to send her stuff and say, hey, we should look into this. And even myself, it might be financial stuff. We're not financial advisors. It might be additional tax stuff. We will dig into it. And sometimes we find out it's relevant, like having your kids work in your business. There's tons of questions about that, and setting them up for success. Whereas we ourselves have learned, well, there's more to it. They didn't give you all the information, or it's not really applicable. And
Mhm.
so just use that as a springboard for education, but be open minded that not everything is fully vetted in what you're watching and
Mhm.
not everything applies to you.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I do think it's a great place to get content or to like get ideas and think about things that we
Yes.
could potentially explain. Cause I've noticed even in our field, like, there's some things that we know just because we've been doing this for a long time that most people just don't know or don't fully
Yeah.
understand. So while a lot of the industry wants to be overcomplicated, secretive, and I feel like sometimes covering the basics or giving some advice that people can actually understand or maybe, take a look at, I think it's a really neat way to communicate it out. As long as,
Yes.
I think there is so much out there that is confusing and it isn't stuff that just comes to people naturally. So I love that you're using it. I think it's a good, I think it's, I think it's interesting to see, like, because I'm like, is that nobody's gonna watch this because it's like it's about, Roth IRAs or whatever. But it's like, no, actually people do. Surprisingly.
Totally.
So
Yes.
I think that's another good way to kind of change the status quo and to like share information and not be like gatekeeping all of these things that people could potentially do, for
Yeah.
without advanced degrees. So you
I
just
think
won an award
ultimately,
oh, go ahead.
oh, I'm so sorry. No, I was just going to say ultimately it's the same as Googling medical things, right?
Yes.
Is take it with a grain of salt and use it as that, like I said, that springboard to get more information. That's the right way to use it.
Definitely. No, I think, yeah, my dog was like coughing the other day and I looked it up and I was like, oh, I should never have done that. I'm just going to be like, this is why I go straight to the vet because now I'm like terrified and about to cry before I go to work because I'm thinking of all these things that could be wrong with my dog and it's actually probably nothing. But you're right. It's a good place to get information. It's a good place to get curious, but then also go back,
Yeah.
find somebody who can talk to you about your specific situation because what works for somebody might not work for you, might not work for your business. And so that's so important. I was just about to mention though that you won an award. Tell me a little bit more about this recent award you won.
We are beyond proud because it's an Inc. 5000 award. There's a lot of, legs to that. And there's a lot of people that are up for it. So it's a culture award that we're culture leaders. We also received last year a Power Partner award that they do. And we're up for those again. And, these are things that you have to meet certain criteria and you have to beat out other people. And I mentioned earlier, we're only a team of 15. We can't afford every benefit in the world, but we do what we can and we maximize where we can and we really invest back in our team. And, things like being recognized at such a small stage for being on a list like this is just really helps us get the word out there that we do put our word and our money where our mouth is, and we're trying to do something different.
Yeah, no, I think that's so cool. It's so that's a big honor. And I think that it's great for, like you said, for your employees. A lot of times we can't offer all the benefits like a huge employer, a corporation can, but I think it's good to be able to say like, no, we're doing a few things right here that people can from
Yeah.
any industry can take a lesson from. So before we wrap up, I'd love it's we're more than halfway through the year. What are some things that you suggest that people can do if they're like, okay, yes, this is usually something I put off until the spring. What are some of those things that people can do right now to kind of better prepare themselves for tax season and going into the 2025?
Oh, you're setting them up for success. So don't wait for fourth quarter. Don't wait for first quarter. Whether it is your bookkeeping team, your CPA, they are going to be so incredibly busy at those times that they're going to push you off until the next year. So now is the time. There's a couple checklist items you can do. Your balance sheet is a good place to start. I know a lot of owners love their P&L. That's where their revenue sits and their profit. But the balance sheet is actually the health of your company. So a couple of things I always suggest is pull the most recent statement and go to your books for your most recent reconciliation. Get the same month. All of your cash accounts, cash, credit card, anything to do with your banking on your balance sheet. If your ending date is the same date on your statement, your ending balance should be exactly the same as what's on the bank statement. I can't tell you how many times those are off and owners don't know. That is an initial red flag of problems in your books. Other things are, and you can Google quick tips, but you shouldn't have weird negatives where there shouldn't be negatives. Your receivables generally should not have a negative unless it's maybe depreciation. But other than that, you shouldn't be seeing weird negatives. If undeposited funds are on your balance sheet, like if you're doing invoicing and receivables, that should not be some crazy high number. And it should fluctuate with receiving those invoices and those payments. Things like that you can look at. Liabilities, you shouldn't have a weird negative in those liabilities. They should match your statements as well. So I would look at those things, get some initial comfort on whatever you're doing right now. Does it look right? Does it look healthy? Another, I'd say a last one is when you do get your taxes done, you should always be getting a handful of adjustments from your CPA that have to do with rolling to retained earnings, excuse me, maybe some appreciation or amortization. But outside of that, if you're getting handfuls and handfuls of adjustments, whether they put them in your books for you or they're sending them to you, that is a massive red flag that there's problems in your books. And the way that they're fixing them is after the fact. They're pushing stuff around with those adjusting entries. And that means your data isn't good all year long. And so what use is it to you? So I would start there. And if you are seeing that those things aren't matching up, definitely get another third party to take a set of eyes on that.
I think those are great tips. And I think that a lot of times if we do some of this work in the second and third quarter, like you said, because we know, that the tax season is, but I feel like it has been easier to have conversations, with my CPA personally, to talk to my bookkeeper because they have a little bit of breathing room. And also
Yeah.
it's good to catch those things. Also, even looking at the expenses, and always kind of having an eye on that because businesses are just kind of like a personal budget. A lot of times there might be something that you used or you loved that you don't use anymore or need anymore. And a lot of times when it's going through the business, we don't catch it as quickly. So I
Yeah.
think that's another thing that you can do to kind of start to maximize your growth is really start getting rid of some of the things that you don't, or using that money to, go into something more, which is either investing in technology, people, or other services that can help. So I think those are all really good things that we can do throughout the year. If people are looking to learn more about your business or follow you and learn more information about this, how can they reach you?
Yeah, we're Dakota Accounting. Our website is dakotaaccounting.com. All of our social handles are Dakota Accounting. Just reach out. We're always happy to have a conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today. Everybody, I beat this drum a lot, but I do feel like knowing your books, knowing your numbers is so important. I feel like it is something that we need to start to be less afraid of. And if that means working with somebody who doesn't set out to make you feel afraid or to feel inferior and kind of wants to help you and be a partner with you, I think that is just the best way for you to actually have more success in your business. So if you're interested, please follow Dakota Accounting. I think it's really great what you're doing, and I love what you're doing for your people and trying to change the industry. I think there's so many industries that deserve some disruption. So
I
good
would
to see you
agree.
out
Yes.
there doing it. And if you're looking to follow up on some other episodes of the podcast, or you'd like to learn more about working with me, please head over to mistylynch.com. I would love to hear from you, and I will see you next week. Don't forget to share with friends and family, and together let's demystify the world of money. Knowledge is the key to financial empowerment.